Britain is in crisis. I'm not talking about the cost of living, illegal immigration, Rachel Reeves's famous fiscal black hole. I'm not talking about an expansionist Russia. I'm not talking about any of the things that hit the headlines. What I'm talking about is much, much worse. It's been with us for a while and is slowly getting worse every day. And it's something that politicians don't want to talk about, shy away from, and have no solution for. So what is this thing that is so bad that it makes everything else look fairly tame in comparison? Well, it's demographics. Demographics in this country are slowly killing us. They are sucking the life out of the economy. They are distorting our politics. And they're making all the issues and problems we face today worse every year that goes on. So how do we get to where we have done? Why is nobody talking about it? And what are the solutions? Well, first, a quick history lesson. The last time that we had replacement rate birth rate in this country, which is about 2.08 births per female, was 1973. And since that year, every year, the birth rate has slowly gone down. Last year for which we have accurate figures, the birth rate was at 1.41. And if those numbers don't mean very much to you, then a birth rate of 1.44, which is slightly better than where we were last year, means that in 2 generations, your population halves. So for 100 children born today, they will have 72 children and 50 grandchildren. Now, pace that large across a nation, and you see that you end up with a very top-heavy population structure with lots of old people after a couple of generations, not many working-age people, and even fewer children. Failure to address the demographic situation in the UK is going to lead to some very, very dire consequences. For instance, we know at the moment that Rachel Reeves has a black hole, anything from 20 to 50 billion pounds, depending on which forecast you believe. And she's desperately digging around for some more money to try and fill that gap. Well, that gap is based on, obviously, the cost she has to bear and the income she's got coming in from tax. And if you have a shrinking working age population relative to your retired population, that equation gets harder and harder and harder every year. If we look forward just to the next 5 years, the cost of pensions and the NHS is due to grow at the rate of about 4-5% every year, while growth in the economy and therefore tax income is due to grow at a rate of just 1%. So that black hole is already getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's just in 5 years. Imagine what it'd be like in 20 years when all these demographic limits come through and we don't have enough people entering the workforce. They're going to be enormous. And we simply cannot afford our current society. Something will have to give, and give really, really hard. And this isn't just a UK problem. There isn't a single nation in the developed world, with one exception, that has a birth rate above replacement rate. The United States is at 1.6, Italy's at 1.2, as is Japan, China's at about 1, which I'll come back to in a minute, and South Korea is at 0.75. And if you're wondering what that will do to a nation, well, with a birth rate of 0.75, in 2 generations, you're down to just 14% of the people you had 2 generations earlier. And it's a major issue for that economy. I mentioned China was at 1. Well, we think China's at 1. But the thing that we found out recently about China's statistics is that they're wrong. Due to the way they're collected, local dignitaries are incentivized to lie because they get more money from the central state. And of the 1.3, 1.4 official Chinese people that exist, China's own demographers estimate that between 100 and 500 million of those don't actually exist. And that the missing millions, hundreds of millions, are all in the lower echelons of the population, which means that they are aging out at a tremendous rate. And if you look at some of the big cities, places like Shanghai and Guangzhou, their birth rate is as low as 0.4. And that means that your population in 2 generations goes down to about 5 from 100, so 5%. So if you think that China is a long-term threat, then I would suggest you think again, because there aren't going to be any Chinese. mentioned there was one exception to the general rule that industrialized nations' birth rates were below replacement rate, and that one exception is Israel. It has a very healthy birth rate of about 3. However, they have their own economic issues related to that, because one of the reasons they have such a healthy birth rate is that because they have a very devout portion of their population which devote themselves to religious study and having large families. And this group of people is largely outside the normal economic structures and can be regarded as economically inactive and therefore not contributing to the tax rate, and which generates its own social pressures. But that aside, every other country in the industrialized world has a very poor birth rate relative to replacement rate, which creates the problems that I'm going to go into in a moment. So why is it we have such poor demographics? Well, it's a factor in industrialization. Before we were industrialized, we had a largely agrarian economy and children were free labor, so you had lots of them. In fact, you had lots plus one, because that's how you knew you had too many. But then when we industrialized, we moved to the cities, children became an expense. So we had fewer of them because most people aren't that stupid. Well, it's a combination of cultural and economic factors. The last time that we had replacement rate birth rate was 1973, and it's been falling ever since. And what drives it is a combination of access to property, homes, because if you haven't got a home, you're not going to start a family, and the pressures to go out and earn a living for women, as most households these days are 2-income households, and that leaves you less time to raise a family, and also social pressures. So there was a time when the woman's place was in the home, looking after the family, and since the 60s, 70s, that's been seen as extremely old-fashioned and, dare I say, misogynistic, and women are empowered to do what they want when they want, and if they want a career, then they will damn well have one, and all power to their elbow. But that does mean that as a result, many of them either don't have children, or they have fewer children, or they start to have a family later and have problems, and therefore might only have one, if any at all, and as a result, our population declines. More recently, we've seen a lot of reports that say that young people are so worried about things like global warming that they don't think they can bring children into this world and are actively looking to avoid it. And we're also hearing that young people are finding it much harder to pair up and find someone, whether that's a function of our digital age or something else going on. But if you're not forming relationships, then your chances of having children diminish hugely. Now, I said that politicians aren't doing anything about this, which is true, and there's a number of reasons for that. One is timescales. The problem with our demographics changes so slowly that it's always something you can put off till tomorrow. Somebody else can fix it, because the difference between the demographics we have today to the demographics we have tomorrow is so small you can't measure it on that scale. So it's always a problem you can put off for somebody else. Secondly, anything you do put in place that will work won't show up in the data for years and maybe decades, in which case you'll get no benefit from what you've done politically, and therefore, why do it? Because politicians are, well, they're politicians. And you can guarantee that whatever things you put in place to improve the birth rate will end up hurting someone. There will be a loser somewhere, and that loser will punish you. Third is, part of whatever solution we have to our birth rate is going to have to be all-encompassing, and that includes social things. And no politician wants to be seen telling a woman what to do with her body or that her place is in the home. Can you imagine the headlines? And so they avoid it like the plague, even though they know that unless somebody addresses it in some way, shape or form, you'll never ever fix the problem. Immigration is not the solution. A lot of people say if we import immigrants, we'll fix it, but we won't. And here's why. In order to counter the current problem we have, it's been calculated we need to bring in approximately 700,000 immigrants a year. And that's not just a one-off, it's every single year. And because the birth rate is not going to improve as a result of that, you're just bringing in more bodies, they're going to age out as well. So all you're doing is delaying the issue. And in the meantime, where the hell are you going to house 700,000 new families or new people every year? You see, if you increase your population by giving birth to more babies, you don't need more properties. The baby goes and lives in the family home. And okay, you might need a bigger one, but then you release the one that you're in, so the net property requirement doesn't really change. Maybe in 20 years or so, when that baby grows up and might want their own place, you might need more, but you've got loads of time to plan for that. But if you're bringing 700,000 new people in, that's anything between 350 and 700,000 new families needed every year, there's nowhere to house them. And we've seen what's happening in terms of the social cohesion in the country right now, and the problems with immigration and, dare I say, potential riots in the streets. Imagine how much worse that would be if you suddenly increased all the immigration. So solving a demographic problem with immigration is a non-starter. You might be able to do a little bit around the edge, but you just can't get the numbers in. But what are the solutions? Well, the solutions have got to be all-encompassing. There is no magic bullet. There is no single policy that is going to change things. You have to make the entire government programme about increasing the birth rate. And I mean every programme. You're going to have to change policies on property so that you make the market more liquid, so you have to get rid of stamp duty so it moves more. You're going to have to majorly reform planning laws so it's much easier to build houses, because if you've got houses, then you're going to be able to house the families of the future. You're going to have to make changes to property taxes, which actually over time brings the cost of houses down relative to wages, otherwise people can't get onto the ladder. You're going to have to make major changes to the way that benefits work for parents, to encourage them, reward them for having children. You're going to have to make changes to the way that businesses deal with mothers, so they don't feel that they've missed out by taking a career break. There are a whole raft of issues, and it needs a major but very, very well done social campaign to make people believe and understand that it's okay to have children. For any birth program, for any pronatal program, it's going to have to be focused primarily on the women. Men, while they have a small part to play in the procreation, all the heavy lifting's done by the women. And you cannot do this kind of program without getting them on side and addressing their needs and their concerns and what they want to see to help them to become mothers and have children. And all those things are going to cost money, and you're going to have to cut costs elsewhere at the same time. So it means a major upheaval of every element of life to do right. But if we don't do it, we will continue with this demographic decline and reach a point where we can no longer afford anything anyway. Much better to take the pain now, where you've at least got some money and your demographics aren't a complete disaster, than wait until they are and it's too late. And on that cheery note, so long.